All right, welcome back, everyone. Ready for another deep dive? This time we're tackling dreams, but not just any dreams. We're going to be looking at what are sometimes called backwards dreams.
Oh, yeah. Those can be pretty wild.
Yeah, they're pretty bizarre. And actually, you sent me a dream that you had that seems to really fit this whole backwards dream thing.
Uh-huh.
And yeah, we're going to try to unpack it a little bit. So in your dream, you're walking down a street, but it keeps morphing and changing. And then you run into all these people who have these weird smiles that are kind of freaking you out.
Yeah.
And to top it all off, you end up getting pulled into a mirror world. And in this mirror world, everything is reversed.
It sounds a little unsettling.
Yeah, I think so. It's definitely an intense dream. So to help us make sense of all this, we've got some dream dictionary excerpts to work with, and we've also got some information about the history of dream interpretation, just to give us some context.
Hmm.
And we also found this really interesting article about the symbolism of mirrors in dreams.
Sounds like we've got a lot to work with.
Oh yeah, for sure. But before we really get into the specifics of your dream, I think it'd be helpful to kind of touch on, the history of dream interpretation just a little bit,
Okay.
just to set the stage. So, people have been trying to figure out what dreams mean for centuries, right? Like way back in ancient Sumeria and Egypt, they saw dreams as messages from the gods or even prophecies about the future. Then you've got the ancient Greeks who believed that dreams could offer guidance and healing. And in medieval Islamic scholarship, they had these elaborate systems for interpreting dreams and connecting them to both the physical and spiritual realms.
Wow. Yeah, that's interesting. So they didn't really distinguish between sort of the spiritual and the physical.
Not really. They
Oh.
saw them as intertwined. But then fast forward to the 20th century, you have the rise of modern psychology, and dream interpretation takes a bit of a turn.
Right. Freud and Jung and all that.
Exactly. So Freud, he came up with the whole idea of dreams as wish fulfillment,
Yeah.
where our deepest desires and fears are kind of playing out in symbolic form. But then you've got Jung, who is all about the unconscious mind and how dreams can reveal these universal archetypes that we all share.
And those are just two examples of how differently dreams can be viewed.
Right. And there are even more perspectives out there. Like Hall, for instance. He had this more cognitive approach to dream interpretation, focusing on how dreams can help us process our daily experiences and make sense of our emotions.
Oh, yeah. I read about some of his research.
Did you? Well, then, he actually ended up supporting some of Freud's ideas about the Oedipus complex. His research on dream content kind of suggested there might be something to it.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, it's pretty fascinating stuff.
Yeah.
And then you've got researchers like Faraday and the Cliffs, who really focused on connecting dream imagery to what's going on in our waking lives.
Right. So trying to find those links between the dream world and reality.
Exactly. But even with all these different theories and approaches, there's still this big debate about whether dreams actually reveal hidden truths about ourselves or the future, or if they're just like random firings of neurons in our brains,
An age-old question.
Right. Like, is there really a deeper meaning to all this, or is it just our brains kind of sorting through the day's events? It's like, are dreams trying to tell us something, or are they just messing with us?
Yeah.
So with that in mind, let's get back to your backwards dream,
Okay.
because this whole backwards thing is really what I'm stuck on. So I looked it up in the Dream Dictionary, and it says that dreaming of things moving backwards can symbolize, like, a feeling of regression or being stuck in some area of your life, almost like your subconscious is hitting the brakes on something.
Huh. The brakes.
Mhm.
That's interesting.
Yeah. So, like, with the shifting landscape in your dream, the street constantly changing, the houses morphing into different shapes, even the ground turning into a trampoline, could that be connected to a feeling of instability in your waking life?
Yeah.
Or maybe even a lack of control over certain things?
It's definitely possible. I mean, those details are all unique to my dream, right? So they have to be important somehow.
Right, exactly. So let's break those details down a bit more, like those houses that keep morphing and changing. What does that feel like to you? Does it suggest that maybe things aren't what they seem in some area of your life?
Mm-hmm.
And then the ground turning into a trampoline, is that like hinting at a fear of things being unstable, or maybe a sense of not being able to find solid footing?
It's interesting you say that because, yeah, those are kind of both feelings that I've been dealing with lately.
Really?
Yeah. And, when you mentioned the trampoline ground, I immediately thought about how it's fun to jump on a trampoline at first, but after a while you realize you're not actually going anywhere. You're just bouncing in the same spot.
Yeah, I see what you mean. You're putting in all this effort, but you're not making any progress.
Exactly.
And that seems to tie in perfectly with that feeling of being stuck that we often see in backwards dreams.
Yeah.
But okay, there's another layer to this whole thing that I think we need to address.
Okay.
Those smiling strangers, they seem pretty unnerving in your dream, right?
Yeah, a little bit. It's not like they're threatening me or anything, but their smiles are just
Sure,
off.
yeah.
Like they know something I don't, and it's not necessarily good news.
Hmm, I get that. Well, there's actually a section in the Dream Dictionary about cars driving in reverse, often without brakes.
Oh, wow.
And it connects that imagery to feeling like you're losing control to outside forces, or maybe even being pulled back into old patterns that you're trying to break free from.
Huh.
So, do you think those smiling strangers could represent those outside forces? Like maybe societal pressures, expectations from others, or even just feeling judged?
That's a really interesting interpretation, and honestly, it makes a lot of sense considering how I've been feeling lately.
Really?
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of pressure coming from different directions right now.
I see. So it's like you're surrounded by these forces that are trying to steer you in a direction you don't necessarily want to go in.
Yeah, exactly.
And it seems like all these different pieces of your dream, the backwards motion, the shifting landscape, the smiling strangers, they're all pointing toward this feeling of not being in the driver's seat of your own life.
I think you're right. It's like I'm on autopilot, just reacting to things instead of actively choosing my own path.
Exactly. And then to top it all off, you encounter this massive mirror. And that's where things get really interesting.
I was wondering when we were going to get to that.
Yeah, the mirror is a whole other layer of symbolism that we need to unpack. But I think we'll save that for part 2 of this deep dive.
Sounds good to me. Okay, so where were we? Oh, yeah, the mirror. So mirrors, right? They're like inherently symbolic.
Yeah, like you can't really see a mirror and not think about reflections and, looking back at yourself.
Right, exactly. And especially in dreams, they often represent this idea of self-reflection, like confronting a hidden part of ourselves, or maybe even seeing ourselves through the eyes of other people.
I get that. So in your dream, you come face to face with this, like, massive mirror. But when you look at your reflection, it feels wrong somehow, distorted. And then you get pulled into this mirror world where everything is reversed. It's like a double dose of unsettling mirror imagery.
Yeah, I know. It's a lot.
Yeah, it is. So what do we make of all that? What could it mean?
Well, I think that feeling of your reflection being off that you mentioned, that could be tied into the idea of self-perception versus reality.
Or like how you see yourself versus how others see you?
Yeah, exactly. Or maybe it's more about confronting aspects of yourself that you've been trying to ignore.
Hmm. So, like the mirror is holding up this truth that you're not quite ready to face.
Possibly. And then being pulled into this reversed mirror world, I think that adds another layer to it.
Yeah, it's like that distortion is amplified.
Right. And the fact that you're being pulled in, not choosing to enter it, that reinforces that sense of things being out of your control.
Like your subconscious is forcing you to confront this distorted reality.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it.
So it definitely adds to that whole theme of feeling stuck, lost, unable to move forward, which we talked about in part 1. But why reversed? What's the significance of everything being backwards in the mirror world?
Well, think about what we've already discussed, right? Feeling stuck, pulled back into old patterns, maybe even a desire to undo past mistakes.
Uh-huh.
So could this reversed world represent a yearning to go back in time, to change things, to escape the current reality?
Oh, that's interesting. Like hitting rewind on your life.
Right. Trying to fix things, or maybe just make sense of how you ended up feeling so stuck in the present?
But dreams usually work in metaphors, right?
Exactly. So it's probably less about literally wanting to travel back in time
Oh, okay.
and more about understanding those underlying feelings of regret, missed opportunities, maybe a sense of being on the wrong path.
I see. So it's not about literally rewinding, but more about figuring out why you want to rewind in the first place.
Yeah, exactly.
So if we connect this back to the backwards motion we talked about earlier, the car driving in reverse, street constantly shifting, it's all pointing towards a longing for something different, a yearning to break free from whatever feels limiting or restrictive in your life right now.
That's a good way to sum it up.
And then we add this whole mirror world on top of that. And it's like, whoa, this dream is packed with symbolism.
It really is.
Yeah. So they're one of those optical illusions where you have to shift your perspective to see the whole picture.
Uh-huh.
It's not just about the individual symbols,
Yeah.
but about how they interact and inform each other.
I like that. It's like all these pieces fit together to create this larger message.
Exactly. And when we consider the overall emotional tone of the dream, that feeling of unease, uncertainty, being out of control, it adds even more depth to the interpretation.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so let's recap. We've got backwards motion, a constantly shifting landscape, those unsettling, smiling strangers, a distorted mirror reflection, and a whole reversed mirror world.
Wow, that is a lot.
It is a lot to process.
Mm.
What do you think, dear listener? Are any of these interpretations resonating with you? Are you having any aha moments as we're talking about this?
And remember, dream interpretation is deeply personal. There's no right or wrong answer.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's really about exploring these symbols and interpretations through the lens of your own experiences, your emotions, what's going on in your life right now. It's
Exactly.
like having a conversation with your subconscious, trying to understand its language and the messages it's trying to send you.
Mm.
But, okay, we've done a lot of analysis here. How do we actually apply these insights to our waking lives?
That's the big question, isn't it? That's what we're going to explore in part 3.
All right, so we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive. We've explored this incredibly vivid dream, the backwards motion, the shifting landscapes, those unsettling, smiling strangers, and a whole reversed mirror world.
Yeah, it's been a wild ride.
Yeah, it has. It's a lot to unpack. But what does it all mean for you, the dreamer, in your waking life? How do we actually take all these symbolic clues and turn them into something useful?
That's the real work, right? Because dreams often speak in this language of metaphors and symbols. It's not about taking things literally.
So it's not like, oh, I dreamt of walking backwards, so now I need to walk backwards in real life.
No, not at all. It's more about understanding the feeling that that backwards motion represents.
Okay, so in this case, it seems like it's pointing toward feeling stuck, being pulled back into old patterns, and maybe even yearning for a do-over.
Right.
So how do we actually translate that into action? Like, what are some steps someone can take if they're feeling stuck?
Well, first, it's important to really identify those specific areas in your life where you feel stuck. Is it your career, your relationships, personal growth? Once you pinpoint those areas, you can start to explore ways to shift that energy.
So it starts with self-reflection.
Yeah.
Figuring out, like, okay, what's making me feel like I'm moving in reverse?
Exactly. And
Yeah.
remember that mirror symbolism in your dream that reinforces that need for self-reflection.
Right.
It's about really looking inward and confronting maybe those aspects of yourself that you've been avoiding.
Okay, yeah. And what about those creepy smiling strangers? Could they offer any clues?
Absolutely. We talked about them potentially representing those outside pressures, that judgment you might be feeling from others.
Right.
So a good question to ask yourself might be, whose expectations am I trying to live up to? Or am I letting other people's opinions dictate my choices?
So it's about figuring out where those pressures are coming from and how to, like, deal with them without letting them control your direction. Right?
Yeah.
But, okay, what about those morphing houses and that trampoline ground? How can we use those surreal images to break free from feeling stuck?
You know, those images are so interesting because they highlight that sense of instability, that uncertainty.
Right.
But here's the thing. Sometimes embracing that uncertainty can actually be the key to moving forward.
Wait, really? How can uncertainty help us get unstuck?
Well, think about it. When we're clinging to rigid expectations, when we're trying to control every outcome, that's when we often end up feeling the most stuck.
Okay.
But when we open ourselves up to new possibilities, even if they feel a little shaky at first, that's where growth happens. That's where change can occur.
So it's about, like, shifting our perspective, taking
Yeah.
those feelings of uncertainty and reframing them as opportunities for, like, exploration and discovery.
Exactly. Remember that trampoline ground in your dream?
Yeah.
You might be bouncing up and down, feeling like you're not getting anywhere. But each bounce gives you a different perspective, a new view of your surroundings.
I'm starting to see this whole dream in a new light. It's not just about feeling stuck. It's about recognizing the potential for change that exists within that feeling.
Exactly. And remember, you're not alone in this journey. Those smiling strangers, even though they felt unsettling in the dream, they could also represent a support system that you might not be fully recognizing in your waking life.
That's a good point. Maybe those smiles, instead of being creepy, are actually encouraging. Like they're saying, hey, we're here for you, even when things feel backwards and uncertain.
I like that.
Me too. And it all comes back to the power of perspective. Sometimes, simply shifting how we look at things can completely transform our experience.
Yeah, I agree.
So if you're out there feeling stuck or lost or like you're moving in reverse, remember this dream. Remember the lessons it holds. Embrace uncertainty. Seek out support. And most importantly, trust yourself to navigate the twists and turns of your own unique journey.
Beautifully said. And remember, dear listener, the subconscious is always speaking to us, offering guidance and insights through these dreams. Pay attention to those messages, and you'll find the path that leads you forward, even if it takes a few detours along the way.
That's a great way to put it. And that's a wrap on our deep dive into backwards dreams. Sweet dreams, everyone.